Okay. Okay. Dear students, I hope you are fine and safe and healthy. In these challenging times, we continue remotely our lectures and courses on General Linguistics. Today, this lecture deals with grammar. We will talk about descriptive grammar, teaching grammar, and prescriptive grammar, and universal grammar. As we explained in our previous lecture, that descriptive grammar is our mental grammar. When a native speaker acquires his or her first language, she or he learns, one, the sounds of his or her language, or the sounds in general of this or that language, the basic units of meanings, and the rules to combine these units to form well-formed, well-grammatical sentences. So, the elements and the rules constitute the grammar of a language. So, the grammar is that we know unconsciously. I repeat, it means the grammar we acquire. It means we acquire the sounds, we acquire the rules, we acquire the units of meaning, and we acquire, of course, the phonemes, how to combine these phonemes to create words and how to combine words to form sentences, well-formed sentences. So, the grammar represents our linguistic competence, and we explained in detail what do we mean by linguistic competence. So, to understand the nature of language, we must understand the nature of this internalized, unconscious set of rules, which is a part of every grammar of every language. Every speaker who speaks a language knows its grammar. And I repeat, I emphasize this knowledge as we saw in part 1 of our courses. This knowledge is unconscious. It means no one taught or teach us the sound, the rules. It means we don't need any teacher, we don't need any formal context to acquire our first language. When linguists want to describe a language, they attempt to describe the grammar of the language that exists in the mind of the speakers. This is what we refer to as linguistic competence. So, a descriptive grammar does not tell you how to speak. It describes speakers' basic linguistic knowledge. No language or variety of language is superior to any other in a linguistic sense. Every grammar is equally complex and logical and capable of producing an infinite set of sentences to express any thought. And we explained in details the concept of creativity. And due to creativity and due to sets or a number or finite rules, we can create, we can produce an infinite set of new sentences, new or never heard sentences. Okay? This concept is referred to as productivity or creativity. No grammar is either superior or inferior to any other. All languages are equal. All grammars are equal. There is no difference. We cannot say this grammar is good or this grammar is bad or this grammar is complex or this grammar is not complex. All the grammars, all the languages in linguistic sense are equal. We cannot pass judgments. We cannot say this language is good and this language is bad. So all the languages, all the grammars are the same. Now let's move to this prescriptive grammar. For ancient times until the present, purists, when I say the purists, it means linguists or grammarians held the view that language change is a corruption, and that there are certain correct forms that all educated people should use in speaking and writing. For example, the Greek Alexandrians in the 1st century, or the Arabic scholars at Basra in the 8th century, and numerous English grammarians of the 18th and 19th centuries wish to prescribe rather than describe the rules of grammar. This gave rise to the writing of many prescriptive grammars. With the rise of capitalism, a new middle class emerged who wanted their children to speak the dialects of the upper class. So this desire led to the publication of many prescriptive grammars. These grammarians prescribe many rules for English, and these rules were based on Latin grammar. So the prescriptive rules were intended to provide guidance to those who wanted to speak and write the so-called standard English. Descriptive or linguistic rules, in contrast or by opposition, serve to describe what people know about language. It means the unconscious knowledge of language they possess, that is a part of what Noam Chomsky describes as our linguistic competence. Prescriptive grammars, unfortunately, are bound to fail because they do not recognize that language is dynamic and changing all the time. All languages are dialects, are expressive, complete, and logical. Number 3, teaching grammar. The grammar of a language is different from a teaching grammar. So, of course, the grammar of a language or the grammar of our native language As I said, we acquire it and we did not learn it. And of course, we have to make a distinction between acquisition and learning. We acquire our native language, L1. For example, a Moroccan context, it may be Moroccan Arabic, Tashlihi, Tarifit, for example. In British context, it's British English. In France, for example, their L1 is France, or the French. It means we acquire our L1, and L1 is our mother tongue. So, for teaching grammar, we learn a new or a foreign language, okay? At the age of 5 or at the age of 7, it depends on the educational system of a specific country. So teaching grammar is a grammar used to learn another language or a dialect. In a country where it is essential to speak a prestige dialect, people who do not speak it natively may or must learn it. For example, suppose Moroccan immigrants, for example, who live in France, okay, they have to learn French to be integrated, for example, in French society. So, of course, as an adult, it is difficult to learn a second language without being instructed. It means we need, as adults, it means to learn a foreign language in a formal context. It means we need a manual, we need a teacher, and we need someone who teach us the rules, the sounds of a foreign language. The purpose of teaching grammar is to state explicitly the rules of the language, the foreign language, and list the words and their pronunciations, and adds in learning a new language and dialect. And of course, in our university, in the grammar we taught to our students in S1, S2 is an example of a teaching grammar. Now, language universals or universal grammar. In linguistics, the word grammar, I emphasize, the word grammar includes everything speakers know about their language. I emphasize they know the sound system called phonology. They know the system of meanings called semantics, and the rules of word formation called morphology, and the rules of sentence formation called syntax. Of course, it also includes the vocabulary of words, it means the dictionary or the lexicon. The business or the task of linguists is to find out, to discover the rules of a language and the rules and the laws that pertain to all languages. Those laws that pertain, it means which are common in all languages, represent the universal properties of language. It constitutes universal grammar. Modern linguists show that there are common, universal properties, laws, rules in the grammar of all languages. Of course, all languages have a noun. All languages have a verb. All languages have a prepositions. All languages have their own means to refer to the past, to refer to the present, to refer to the future. All languages, for example, have their own means to indicate case, and so on and so on. Such properties, such values, such rules, which are in common to all languages, constitute a universal grammar of human languages. And to discover the nature of this universal grammar, whose principle characterizes all human languages, is the major aim of linguistic theory. It means the linguist's goal is to discover the laws of human language. Now, I hope I have covered all the elements, all the issues discussed, raised in chapter 1. And of course, this chapter or this booklet on linguistic knowledge will provide you with many examples and will provide you, of course, with an explanation in details. Now, I will move to chapter 2, which is phonology. I know that you tackled the chapter on phonetics in semester 4, and there is no need to tackle or to examine this chapter in semester 6. Before moving, or before explaining in details phonology, let's start by defining what is the difference between phonology and phonetics. I will summarize some distinctions, some similarities, and some differences between phonology and phonetics. Phonetics provides the means for describing speech sounds. Phonology studies the ways in which speech sounds form systems and patterns in a language. I underline in a language. It means we refer to a specific language. Phonology is based on a theory of what every speaker of a language unconsciously knows about the sound patterns of this or that language. Phonetics is the study of production and the perception of speech sound. Phonology, in contrast, is the study and analysis of the sounds of a particular language as an integrated system of contrasting features. Phonetics is more general. since it is concerned with the description and classification of sounds respective of their function in a particular language. Phonology is more particular because it is language specific. It means it is concerned, and phonology focuses on a specific language. It focuses on Moroccan Arabic, focuses on the dialects of Moroccan Arabics. It focuses, as an example, on French, spoken in a specific area, and so on and so on. So phonology is concerned with the study of the sound function. I repeat, the sound function in a particular language. Let's move now to phonological knowledge. It means, what do you know? When you speak a language, what do you know? When you learn a language or you acquire a language, you learn which speech sounds occur in your language and how they pattern according to regular rules. Of course, as British speaker, for example, he or she knows when, for example, he or she uses aspirated, non-aspirated sounds. For example, a Moroccan speaker knows that, for example, the sound q, the sound h, the sound kh do not exist in other foreign languages, but he or she knows that these sounds occur in his language, and consequently it is easy without any difficulties for any Moroccan speaker to produce the sound kh, h, a. Why? Because these sounds occur in his native language. Phonological knowledge permits or enables the speaker, one, to produce sounds which form meaningful utterance. Of course. For example, as I said, any Moroccan speaker is able to produce the sounds of his or her language without any problem. For example, French speaker cannot produce the sound h, cannot produce the sound h, cannot produce the sound h. Why? Because these sounds are not a part of the sound system of their language. As I said, number one, to produce sounds which form meaningful sentences or utterances. Number two, to recognize foreign accents. To recognize foreign accents. This is very important. For example, when British speakers hear, for example, foreign speakers, they can locate where they come from. Of course, it means they can discover, okay, the origin of those people who speak English. Why? It means the accent of these speakers is different from the accent of a native speaker. For example, French speakers, notice how French speakers, when they produce the words like médecine, In English, we pronounce the word meeting, but French speakers produce the word with meeting. No, it's wrong. Another example, this and that. French people produce this with this, that with that. Why? Because they cannot produce this. They say this. Why? Because the sound the does not exist in English. And consequently, they have problems in producing, for example, the sound the. The same example when French speakers, for example, cannot produce Ali. Ali, for example, they say Ali, for example. Why? Because the sound does not exist in their native language. Number 3, for example, for British people or British speakers, they are able to produce aspirated and non-aspirated voiceless stops in the appropriate context. It means, as British speakers, they know when and where to use aspirated stops and non-aspirated sounds. No one taught them how and when. It means they know it unconsciously. And they know it due to their phonological knowledge. To know what is or is not a sound in one language, we explain this in details. To use the correct pronunciation for each word. For example, the word, and of course, for example, the word reports has two pronunciations, report and report. And of course, British people know how to use the right stress. And the right stress is very important in distinguishing between a verb and between a noun. For example, the word reports, it has two pronunciations, and due to the stress, we know when a report is a verb and when a report is a noun. It means native speakers use the right stress of their language. Of course, another feature, it means British people or British speakers, they know how to control intonational differences. It means they know how to use intonation. And intonation sometimes distinguishes questions from statements. Now, let's move to phonemes. Phonemes is as you know, is a unit of sound that distinguishes one word from another in a particular language. And phoneme is the smallest unit in a language. For example, the sounds p and b are two separate phonemes of English that distinguishes the word pen from bin. So p and b are two different phonemes. Why? Because they have two different meaning. If we substitute the sound p by the sound b, as a result, we have two different meanings. What is important to understand, to know about the phonemes? The phoneme is described as a sound type. As a sound type. I repeat, as a sound type. What does it mean? It means a phoneme is a mental. It means it has a mental representation. It is abstract. And it has different versions, different tokens when we move to speech. For example, the sound T is a phoneme, but when we produce the sound T in speech, it has a different pronunciation. The same example for the sound P. As I said, P is a phoneme which is an abstract. It's not tangible. But when we use it in speech, we have different pronunciation of P. For example, as I said, British people differentiate, know how to produce aspirated and non-aspirated P. As a result, the sound P or the phoneme has many realizations, has many productions, has many pronunciation due to the word in which it occurs. So, as I said, the sound P is an abstract segment, and it has physically produced in different ways as according to the context. An essential property of a phoneme is that it functions intrusively, as I explained just a minute. Now let's move to the differences or to phones and allophones. Allophonic differences may appear in words where the phonetic environments of the allophones vary. While the phoneme is the abstract unit or sound type in the mind, there are many different versions of that sound type produced in actual speech in the mouth. So, a phoneme, as a result, very simply, a phoneme has a different realizations, has a different pronunciations, and these different pronunciations are called allophones. The next lecture, inshallah, I will provide you with many examples from British context, from French and Moroccan context. In the next lecture, we will finish our lecture on phonology and we move to syntax. Thank you for your attention.